So now we'll have a look at the situation in the east and talk a bit about what Russia's ambitions probably are at this point. And we can begin with Isium here. Here it seems that Russia has successfully crossed the Donets River and seems to have established control over Kamyanka and Socha Kamyanka here. And this is likely the 47th Tank Division pouring into this pocket and now attempting to, break out of it and seize proper amount of territory on the other side of the river here. And it has been successful so far at pushing back these two Ukrainian brigades. It's a bit uncertain what the status is of Isium itself right now. So it does not seem that it has completely fallen, but it might be nearly completely under Russian control at this point. It's a bit hard to tell, really. There are rumors that Russia has successfully established a Putin bridge here as well, somewhere along here, over the Donets River now. So that will hasten and getting troops over here. Further east, there is fighting going on over Severodonetsk. Although there is little movement of the front here. Of course, this entire eastern front is quite well entrenched after years of warfare between Ukraine and the separatists. There seems to be an ongoing attack on Popasna now. Maybe I should put this like here. Well, we can kind of see that since the start of this war, there has been quite little westward movement of Russian and separatist troops. And that is, of course, again, because this line is so well entrenched. Although here, towards Popasna, there has been a bit of it. Yeah, no, actually, maybe it does belong here after all, because here there has been none. No movement at all. You have a place called New York, which apparently is quite well entrenched. I have not heard reports of it being attacked today, and it may be that they are trying to encircle it rather than attack it directly. Avdiivka is not captured despite being right on the border before the war. So this is one hell of a fortress. Oh, did I not turn on the... Oh, no, that's... here, that's important. Yeah. Of course, the separatists have forces here too. Marinka is not necessarily under complete separatist control, as there were reports of attacks here today. So this too might be one of these fortresses, essentially, that have held the line quite well since the start of the war. This front, I have not heard anything from it from the last 2 days, but I mean, honestly, along this entire line, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of heavy fighting as well. So this is, despite it not perhaps receiving the attention it deserves through most of this war, this is where a lot of the truly heavy fighting happens. Then we have a interesting offensive from Russia. That is towards Golaipolye, which is part of this defensive line consisting of these Kamyansky, Orikhiv, and Golaipolye itself, that Ukraine has done quite a good job at holding. But the interesting thing is that the regiment attacking it this time was from the 19th division, and that is a division I had mapped as being over here. So this seems to suggest that Russia has brought over more troops to this front now. Now, of course, you can't know if the entire division is here, or if this is just that single regiment, or perhaps two regiments. I think it has 3. But still, it seems that Russia is reinforcing this front, and that again might be in preparation for this maneuver of coming from the north through Isium and breaking through this line to wrap around here and essentially meeting somewhere in between to cut off the Ukrainian troops in the east. And finally we have Mariupol. This map is probably optimistic for how much of the city Ukraine controls now. But I think I will wait with updating it to something more exact till tomorrow or in 2 days, and then we will see what the situation is. When it comes to this maneuver of encircling the troops in the east, of course, if Russia should pull this off, right? Maybe pushing this out. This is absolutely devastating. Like this destroys the Ukrainian war effort completely. But I have heard that the troops Russia has available in this area is not quite enough to actually make closed pocket around them here. So Russia will likely need to bring in more troops, both in the north and the south, to pull off such an offensive. So we may see Russia pull some troops from other fronts to place on this front and conduct an offensive. Also, this brigade is very likely in Ukraine already. Like, this is its normal placement, and I haven't seen anything of it. That is likely to be moved to this front, and then the southern front will likely be reinforced from Mariupol when that eventually falls. And then, perhaps some additional reinforcements will be brought in, and they will try to make this pocket happen. Now, of course, Ukraine will try to retreat in order and establish a defensive line that allows them to not be encircled in the east, but still, not give up everything east of the Dnieper. Okay, so you have definitely heard about this. The Russian army states that it will now focus on the Donbas. So the question then is, also it should be said that there has been some talk of this from Ukraine as well, possibility of a compromise over the Donbas region. Although so far the terms Ukraine suggests for this to happen on are quite unlikely to actually happen in practice, because it would have the separatists give up pretty much all the territory that they have captured since this war began. That is very unlikely for Russia and them to accept. But yeah, Western media says that this new focus on Donbas for Russia is a sign that Russia has met a lot more resistance than it expected in Ukraine, and is kind of seeking a way out of the war that can be portrayed as a victory. And that would then be, saying that this war was for the Donbas all the way, all along, right? And now we have conquered it, now we have won, now we can get out of Ukraine. There is likely that they would demand a little bit more than that as well, because after this, if you don't pressure Ukraine to formally become a neutral country, then it will definitely join NATO and Europe along the line, a bit down the line, right? So that will definitely be an additional demand in this case. I also think that even if Russia does try to de-escalate the situation after taking control of the Donbas, then it will probably annex Kherson and Zaporizhia, or at least it will probably want to annex these provinces as well, because this is a land bridge to Crimea, which they definitely want, and I mean they have essentially captured it already. Like they don't have all of Zaporizhia, of course, but that they have the parts that are needed to establish a land bridge between the Donbas and Crimea through Kherson, of course. So I think that Russia will not willingly give back these territories, even in the scenario where they try to de-escalate and get out to Ukraine as soon as possible after capturing Donbas. However, it may also be that it does not signify that Russia is scaling down its territorial ambitions in Ukraine, and that Russia may well still want to conquer more of Ukraine than just the Donbas and this land bridge. But if Russia is to move a lot of troops over to the Donbas front in order to close this pocket, then that might mean that it will lose territory elsewhere. So this statement may be to save face as that happens. I think that maybe the first explanation is a little bit more likely, but that is a possibility that should be considered. Also, it may be that when they say that there is a first phase and now we're entering a second phase, that might be true. So there was this intercepted Russian communication from a while back, and that essentially suggested that you had phases of conquering Ukraine, but that was one region at a time essentially. So it was the Donbas and this land bridge to begin with. Then you have like Odessa, and then you have all the land in the east of the Dnieper, and then everything except western Ukraine essentially. So when this attack happened, people kind of scrapped that phase-wise thinking, saying that all phases were executed at the same time with this attack. But that is not necessarily true, because it may be that Russia has tried to establish a center to operate from in all parts of Ukraine, but then you run through these phases, right? So you try to so you have established a Russian presence in Kherson, and yeah, that is also true. secured land west of the Dnieper here, and that makes it difficult to use the Dnieper as a defensive line down the road for Ukraine. And also here you have secured some land west of the Dnieper, and also you make a very significant threat that Ukraine has to defend near Kiev. And of course here as well you have established Russian operations. And then after making a quick land grab in several parts of Ukraine, you do a more methodical focus on one part at a time. That might be possible. Now, of course, I'm not necessarily saying that these latter two are the case, but they are definitely worth considering because we should not be so quick to assume that Russia will want to get out of this as soon as possible. But of course it might well be the case as well. One thing that is related to this that is interesting to note is that Russia is behaving very differently in how it occupies the north and the south of Ukraine. So I call this Konotop Russia against Kherson Russia. So in Konotop, Konotop is still allowed to fly the Ukrainian flag. It is essentially still under civilian Ukrainian administration, but what they have to do in exchange is let the Russian military operate freely around it and not house Ukrainian troops and so on. But there seems to be little effort to incorporate the parts occupied in the north. Well, in the south, you see something very different, where, say for instance, this nuclear plant here, this was transferred to the Russian Rosatom, which is the Russian state-owned organization that drifts power plants in Russia. And here the Russian flag is flown to much larger extent, and there is talk of switching the currency in using Kherson to rubles. And these signs suggest that there are plans of annexation, while in the north we may think that it is more likely that Russia envisions this being more of a temporal occupation. But we will have to see down the road. There is of course the possibility that in order to get Ukraine to recognize losing this, and then this will be used as a bargaining chip. So Russia will offer to give control of this area back to Ukraine in exchange for Ukraine formalizing Russian control over this area. But again, we will have to see. We don't know if Russia is trying to get out of this as soon as possible, or if they have ambitions of annexing all of Ukraine. And the truth is probably somewhere in between. And finally, two small things. So Russia recently took this small city here, which means that Russian control in this area is perhaps also not as complete as the map would suggest right now. And the ruble is doing surprisingly well as well. So of course it is still weaker than it was before the build-up to the war. It is weaker than it was when the war started, but it has recently strengthened itself after spiking quite hard a bit into the war when sanctions started to hit. On the note of what Russia plans to do to Ukraine, while there is this talk of compromising over Donbas, there is also a claim from Ukrainian intelligence that Russia is planning to split Ukraine in half. So that would be perhaps along the Dnieper and maybe with Mykolaiv and Odessa in the Russian part as well. Something like that. But it remains to be seen. Yeah, that should do it for now. I think I will make a video as well about some of the logistics in south of Ukraine that are more important than we often give them credit for. Okay, so hopefully see you around then.